The Big 12 Big East battle coming up this weekend will feature the Georgetown Hoyas coming to Morgantown to take on the West Virginia Mountaineers. And we're going to talk about that game. We're going to learn a little bit about the Hoya squad. And we're going to do that in this edition of Hoops from the Hills, part of the Couz's Corner Network. In order to learn a little bit about this game, I've brought on a special guest who covers Georgetown for CasualHoya.com and the Casual Hoya Podcast, Mr. Bobby Bancroft. Bobby, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How's it going?
Doing well. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join me and talk a little hoops.
Got an old Big East battle. It's the Big 12 Big East challenge,
right.
or the battle, whatever it's called. But, I sort of, remember the good old days of West Virginia being a fierce rival of the Hoyas.
Yep. Yeah, I remember we had a lot of good battles, man, especially Big East tournaments and whatnot. I kind of miss those rivalries, man. UConn, Georgetown, Villanova. That was some fun times.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to make it to Morgantown this week. The Friday game is just not great for my schedule. But the one time I was there, the 2008 season, Jesse Sapp hit a pretty big shot, I think, over Alex Ruoff. And then, the game-winning shot, but then Patrick Ewing Jr. blocked a shot at the buzzer.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of controversy. Was it a goaltender or not? Huggins didn't seem to take it too well.
Yep.
And it was a great environment.
Yeah, I remember that. I vaguely remember. I don't remember it a lot, but I tell you the one I remember the most. Obviously, I'm going to remember the wins, right? But
yeah, of course.
The Deshaun Butler last second shot to send West Virginia to win the tournament for West Virginia. Do you remember that one?
I was also there. I haven't really enjoyed the Country Road song since then, as it was playing at Madison Square Garden.
Yep.
Yep, I was there for that one too.
Actually, one of my fondest memories as a West Virginia fan was that game, to be honest, because that was our first Big East championship, and obviously it meant a lot to Hugs because he had come back, for that reason, and we ended up going on to the Final Four that year. So that was one of the best teams in West Virginia history, that 2010 squad. So some great memories for us.
Oh yeah.
Real quick, man. Obviously, I have your X, Twitter handle, whatever it is on the screen there, at Bobby Bancroft. It's Bancroft for those of you who may just be listening over on X. Where else can they find you and your work and interact with you?
So yeah, over at Casual Hoya is where you'll find a lot of stuff. And then we have our own podcast called Kente Corner. And you can find that on Spotify. That's kind of what we're doing right now.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and talk hoops, man. Let's talk about this game coming up. I don't know a whole lot about this Hoya squad. Looks like they did drop one game to Notre Dame a couple weeks ago, but they're coming in at 7-1 on the year, I think is what I saw. So they have already have 8 games under their belt. They've been playing a lot of games. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this Hoyas team, man?
Yeah, so it's year 2 of Ed Cooley. He's completely revamped the roster, which needed to happen, obviously, when you've, been struggling like the Hoya program has been. Basically, you bring back Jaden Epps, last year's leading scorer, and between freshmen and transfers, it's a new-look Hoya team. He really needed to improve the defense so far, and, Ken Palm really likes a lot of their improvement there. They're one of the worst teams last year in defending two-pointers. Now they're pretty good. Their best player right now, Thomas Sorber, has won 3 of the 4 Big East Freshman of the Week. He's a big man. He's a post player. They got Malik Mack come over from Harvard. He's pairing with Jaden Epps in the backcourt. It's kind of looking more like an Ed Cooley team than maybe he was able to put on the floor last year. Micah Peavy came over. You guys are probably familiar with him from the Big 12.
Unfortunately, yes. If I recall, he played pretty well against us from TCU.
Yeah, so that's kind of, the crown jewel of the recruiting class as far as, with the team that doesn't really have any upperclassmen. Jaden Epps is a junior. Micah Peavy, obviously I think is a 5th year. And he came over, I think, as a known defender. And I think he wanted to, have more opportunities on the other side of the court. And he's proven to be just a tremendous all-around player for the Hoyas. And it's something that Ed Cooley's needed. And, right now, you did mention they're 7-1. They lost to Notre Dame. Thomas Sorber, their center, was not feeling good. Almost didn't played a little bit. Wasn't really himself. No one's really in, excuses and this thing and that.
Right.
But that is a real thing for Georgetown.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
if you look at Georgetown's schedule, you're not really going to see a lot of names that you recognize. And Ed, admits to that. He's like, look, the point of the preseason for him was getting his team familiar with each other, getting his team to see wins, see the ball go through the basket, and they've accomplished it. The last couple of years, Georgetown's always found a way to lose to teams that you would never think they would lose to. They didn't do that this year. And, you could say that's a small step, but it's a step that Georgetown needed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look at, I'm looking at the results here. I mean, yes, they may have played some teams that, like you said, nobody's ever heard of, but they've not been just winning. They've been taking care of business. They've been winning by large margins. I mean, they beat UMBC 88-62. They beat Albany 100-68. Wagner 66-41. So they've been winning. They've been doing what you're supposed to do in those games and putting teams away. To me, that's a sign of a good team. That's what good teams do. If I looked here and saw, single-digit wins through these games, I might be concerned as if I was a Georgetown fan. But it looks like Georgetown's going to have a pretty good squad this year. What are the expectations for Georgetown this year? I mean, within the fan base.
Yeah, so the last 3 years, they've combined to win 4 Big East games. 3 of those wins are against DePaul. So,
yeah,
you've got to crawl before you can run, walk before you, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I think the expectations right now, like if you look at Ken Palm, they got him going 8-12 in the Big East. I know if you're a fan of a school, particularly like Georgetown does have a great history, 8-12 doesn't sound good on the surface, but where they've been, that would be a phenomenal season right now. But because of how good some of the freshmen have been playing, there's a couple guys I haven't mentioned. Local freshman Caleb Williams has sort of become like a glue guy that they've really been missing for a while. Mulready is another good-looking guard. That's a freshman. I think just you want to see the actual wins, but to see progress. Georgetown was just non-competitive too much last year that it did look sort of, if you didn't know what was going on, it looked like another Patrick Ewing season. And, Ed Cooley has obviously been a much more accomplished college coach than Patrick. I think people were expecting to see a little bit more last year. But this is the year where you've got to, like I said, 8-12 would be a tremendous record, even, 6 wins, something like that. But just being in more contests, just far too many uncompetitive results last year. And I know it was really tough for the fan base and for Ed, who's, been a very successful coach.
Yeah. What do you, when it comes to Georgetown, again, everyone, I'm talking with Bobby Bancroft from CasualHoya.com, who covers Georgetown basketball. When you look at this team, the Georgetown team, it doesn't look like they're a great 3-point shooting team. So where do they get most of their points from? Are they more of an inside out team? What's their MO?
Yeah, so the guards I mentioned already, PV, Epps, and Mack have proven to be, good to adequate 3-point shooters. I think people are hoping that Mack, the transfer, the local kid from Harvard, that he ends up turning it on a little bit. PV it's been his best, 3-point shooting team, but they're looking for another option. I think maybe someone off the bench, Mulready, Williams. There's a couple guys that have sort of been cut from the rotation. Curtis Williams Jr., Drew McKenna, who was on the team last year, green shirted. He showed up in January, didn't play. It kind of starts and stops right now with Thomas Sorber, because you may not have seen it, but they have a pretty good, interesting, intriguing prospect from New Zealand that was playing in all their games. A 7-footer, kind of got the international game. He's out right now.
Okay.
So it does kind of go through Sorber, and basically, if anyone other than Epps and PV, and I guess you're going to include Mack there, aren't shooting the 3, you don't really need to guard them. And I think that's what a lot of the Georgetown fan base is sort of interested in. Like, how will a team like West Virginia defend Georgetown? I mean, obviously, there's not a lot of depth at center.
Right.
They're starting 4-man. Drew Fielder is probably your backup 5. So Ed's kind of starting both of his options at the 5. They could bring Jordan Burks off the bench and have him play and be a little bit different. But they're not a good 3-point shooting team. And I imagine teams like West Virginia, teams with good coaches, teams that are, at the major level, are going to dare Georgetown to shoot. And can anyone step up and, make those shots?
Yeah, my biggest concern as a West Virginia fan is, West Virginia, obviously, you mentioned us being short. It's not a lot of depth inside. Our starting 5 is 6'8", right? Monty Hansberry. Now he's been playing really well. He's averaging about 7.5 rebounds a game. He had a really good performance over in the Bahamas this past weekend in the battle for
The whole
Atlantis over
team did.
there.
I was really
Oh, they
impressed by that.
did.
I thought we
Yeah,
might
they
have a
did.
top 25 West Virginia team on our hands.
Yeah, were it not for that stupid Louisville game, you probably would have. And that win doesn't look that loss doesn't look too good now after they got pounded by I don't remember who they played, but they got pounded by an SEC team in the SEC ACC battle. So yeah, it's that didn't look great. But anyway, it is what it is. But 2 wins over ranked teams will take it, especially considering what we're dealing with this year with a new team and a new staff. But I'm a little concerned about the size. I mean, Sorber, you mentioned Sorber 6'10", Drew Fielder 6'11". Jordan Burks, even you talked about, he's 6'9". So, and we got Hansberry at 6'8". Now he's been able to hold his own. He boxing out, being physical, just wanting it more than the other team at times has been kind of their MO. So I'm worried that they'll take advantage of that. The one thing you talked about how West Virginia will defend, I expect they will put Sincere Harris, who's West Virginia's best defender, on-ball defender, on Micah Peavy, I would imagine. I don't think he's big enough to guard Sorber down low. That'll probably be given to Hansberry to handle. But so I don't know. I could be wrong. They may end up, they put Harris usually on. They'll put him on whoever they feel is the other team's best guard typically. Do you expect that to be Micah Peavy? Would you say Peavy's Georgetown's best front court player?
To get back to the expectations real quick.
Sorry.
I think that – no, it's okay. No, I just think that this game does have some matchup, interesting matchups with strengths and weaknesses. Georgetown is not a particularly good team defending the 3.
Right.
So I think that's probably the biggest concern, letting guys have open 3s. So it is kind of an outside-inside matchup. And, I mentioned Georgetown's expectations about just, seeing improvement, getting better, 7-8 wins in, the Big East. I think if they were to somehow even if they don't beat the Mountaineers, I think a really good showing by Georgetown in Morgantown would probably raise the expectations for the program for the season. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, when you look at ESPN matchup predictor, they have West Virginia 81% chance to win. I'm not sure how much I don't know that I would put it that high, but I'm kind of I'm a more of a pessimistic leaning person. My expectations are typically lower, but especially, I mean, I don't want to get. I'm trying not to overhype the performance in the Bahamas. You know what I mean? But it's hard not to get really excited about that after what they did over there. But I know it's.
I think anytime you beat Gonzaga, I think you've got to really enjoy that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I just know it's. I'm a realist. I've seen too many games. I've seen too many seasons. I know how brutal, especially once we get into Big 12 play, how brutal it's going to be game in, game out, week in, week out. So, and I'm sure you feel the same about the Big East, who arguably is the second or third best. Some might say the first best conference. The way UConn's struggling this year so far, I'm not sure. That's a conversation for another day. But that's surprising, isn't it? But what's going on at UConn?
It is surprising, but at the same time, it's hard to win back to back to back.
Yeah.
How big of a game you think this is for the local fans? I know this is your podcast. I'm asking you questions.
No, that's great. I like a good back and forth. That makes it fun.
I always look at, I sort of miss playing West Virginia, and I feel like West Virginia probably misses having most of its games more in the eastern corridor than spread out all over the country. You guys have already played Pitt. Georgetown's coming through. Is this, do fans look at Georgetown and see the team that struggled for the last few years, or do they look at Georgetown and say, this is Georgetown?
I would say I live in the southern part of West Virginia, but I would say for the folks in the northern part of the state who are closer to Georgetown, and of course, West Virginia has a large fan following in the D.C. area, honestly.
So, it was always a good game here.
Yeah. So for those fans and the ones in the Morgantown area, and for your what I'll call the more traditional fans, I think this is a big game. I mean, I think anytime you're playing one of the old Big East teams, I think it means a lot. Where Georgetown has been struggling the last few years, and where West Virginia has had some struggles, maybe it doesn't have the same excitement as it would have had 10 years ago. But but I think it's exciting, you know, and we love the Big 12, especially on the basketball side. I mean, it's a very exciting conference. But we do miss as fans, you know, it's hard to travel to games in the Big 12, away games, you know, it's you miss the older rivalries, the regional rivalries. And I do miss the regionality of college sports. I think that's kind of what college sports was built on, was the regional rivalries and regional matchups and the fan excitement. And we've lost a little bit of that. But then when you look when you look and you see teams like Baylor, who's now a powerhouse, you see teams like Kansas on your schedule every year. It's hard not to get excited about that too. So it's good and bad, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely good to have. I think games like this need to remain on the schedule each year in the non-conference because of the regionality and the fan excitement, especially, like I said, the traditional fans, you know, in my generation or older who grew up on Big East basketball.
It's a shame the last time West Virginia came and played at Georgetown, it was during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So we couldn't go to the games.
Right.
They played on campus.
Yeah.
Before that, I think the only other time that they've played was an NIT game. It was also on campus. I remember Huggins' post game was just devastated, and he talked about how he's going to improve the team. And next year, West Virginia had a lot of new players. It was before the portal era, and they were really good. So he meant what he said. But you know, when I started first covering the team, 2011, just the coaches that would come through was just. I mean, it's just amazing for someone that, you know, grew up watching it and was, you know, an adult fan, season ticket holder, and then got into it. And you're like, wow, I'm sitting here. I get a chance to talk to Bobby Huggins, and, you know, Calhoun was still coaching at that time. Patino's obviously back. Boeheim was there. Right. I mean, you could just go on and on and on. And I do miss West Virginia being a part of that. So I think it's good that they play. I'd like to see them, you know, obviously you can't play everybody every year. But I think that this would be a good matchup that you would see semi-regularly.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned Georgetown not being able to, or struggling to defend the three. That makes it that to me opens the door for somebody like a Tucker DeVries, who's, I mean, he takes majority of his shots from behind the 3-point line. Was 8 of 12 from three against Arizona the other day. I'm sure
scary stuff for Georgetown fans.
Yeah. And then Javon Small can hit it. I mean, really, there's not a guy on West Virginia's roster that can't shoot the ball. You know, Sincere Harris is not really known for his shooting, but there's not really a guy on the roster that, for the most part, that can't shoot the ball from outside. Hansberry even shoots it from outside. I mean, he's a stretch four. He's not really a five anyway, and he's having to play that out of necessity. Which, to be honest, DeVries doesn't. He coaches what he calls it positionless basketball. He doesn't really. He plays a lot of 5 out anyway, so there's not really true positions. But yeah, they like to shoot the three, man. So it'll be interesting, like you say, with Georgetown's size versus West Virginia loving the three ball. Will make for a kind of a chess match between these two coaches to see who can exploit matchups the best. To me, at least that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, and I think for Georgetown, they had a pretty good matchup the other night against a UMBC team that is really good shooting. They entered the game in the top 20 nationally. They hit a couple threes early, and then they missed 8 in a row. I think UMBC finished 4 for 20. Ed kind of let the guys figure it out a little bit. And obviously, Peavy can't guard everybody, so he's going to be on, you know, the top threat. Jaden Epps has improved his defense, but it's going to be a team effort. And you know, West Virginia is not the only team that Georgetown's going to face. They got Creighton coming up. They love to throw up the three ball. So this is something that they're going to have to improve on, and, you know, punish teams on the other end. You know, I think it's a great matchup for Georgetown. I wish WVU had that little number by its name. It would add a little bit more, I thought.
Right.
But this is a really good team, and, you know, it's, as you said, this is the second time you guys have had a coach and a coach's son. You know, I remember Beeline coming over.
Yep.
With his dad. So this is not new territory. I think it's going to be a great game. I wish I could have found a way to make it. I just got too much stuff to do Saturday morning, and I definitely don't want to drive back after the game.
No, I totally understand. Yeah. A little different though with this. I mean, Beeline was off. He was a great shooter too. Patrick Beeline, one of the better shooters we've had at West Virginia.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's as good all-around player as what Tucker DeVries. Tucker DeVries is also leading the team with almost 2 blocks a game, so he can do a little bit of everything. He's not just a shooter.
Yeah, Beeline definitely didn't fit into that category. But as soon as I
Yeah,
saw what was going on, I was like, "Oh, I've seen
yeah,
this before. I've seen a
yeah,
coach come over with his kid and
yep.
have a lot of success."
Having flashbacks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's we so far the Darren DeVries hire for us, we're only 7 games in, or 7 games into the year, I think, but it's been a home run hire so far, man. I mean, uh, they play with a tenacity and a grit that West Virginia fans have grown to love under Bob Huggins, and it kind of fits the MO of our state and our culture. So we love it. Very hard nosed defense. I call it. I was talking to my dad the other day, and I see it as kind of a merger. You take the John Beeline style of basketball, where like, the back Princeton, I call it Princeton style offense, where they like to do backdoor cuts and pick and rolls, and they pass the ball a lot,
I love
share
the
the ball
Princeton.
well. That style of offense, and you match it with a Bob Huggins like tenacity on the defensive end. That's kind of what Darren DeVries is. He's kind of a blend to me. Now he's not going to press all game like the Press Virginia days or any of that, but to me, it's almost a blend of those two styles of ball, and I love it. I think it's extremely fun to watch as a fan, both offensively and defensively. It's very with Huggins. His teams had a tendency to struggle offensively. It was not always pretty. They kind of had to win with defense and rebounding and kind of win ugly. This team can do that, but they can also shoot the ball. So it's kind of nice to have.
Is Huggins visible at all? Is that what's kind of the situation there?
He attends about every home game. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I mean,
That's
they
cool.
don't talk about it on air. I don't know that they're allowed
Sure.
to. He's kind of
Sure.
been blackballed a little bit, to be honest, by the administration, unfortunately. But he does attend as a fan and watch the games. And somebody always snaps a photo and puts it on social media, so you kind of see it. But yeah, he's still around. He still loves West Virginia basketball. He always will. It's in his blood, So
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully he's doing okay. I know he had some issues, and obviously, but I think at the same time, Georgetown with some of its old coaches that have had success, there's kind of been a separation, and I think that can get hard for some of the fans. So the idea that Huggins is still around and not just grinding an axe publicly or anything like that, that's probably good for the program.
Yeah, I think it was tough last year. Last year, I feel like, this is my opinion. I love Huggins, by the way. I think what he did for the state and our program is unmatched. But the way it ended was on him. He made a huge mistake.
Yep.
And he was lobbying he was lobbying behind the scenes trying to keep the job and get his job back, and it just created a huge mess. And between he and the school and him coming to games, to me, was creating a distraction. But I don't know, now that we have a new coaching staff now, I don't know that it's as big a deal, right? I think he can now. To me, that was when you get a whole new staff and a whole new team in, it's kind of like you've turned a page now.
Yeah.
So now I have no issue with him hanging around and being there. Last year, I felt like it would have been best for him to stay away because he had recruited a lot of the kids on that team, and they see him sitting in the bleachers, and I don't know. I just, to me, it wasn't a good look. But at the same time, you can't tell him he can't come, right? He's a private citizen now. If he has money to get into, and he's arguably the biggest name in West Virginia basketball outside of Jerry West ever. So what are you going to do? Tell him he can't come in the door? I mean, it was a tough situation, for everybody.
Another big picture thing I'm interested in. What's your take on UConn? It seems like every couple of months UConn comes up, and obviously the basketball is incredible, but the football, they probably shouldn't even have an FBS team, all that kind of stuff. This is a basketball talk right now.
That's okay.
Would you like to see UConn added, or what's kind of the position?
I'm mixed on it. I wouldn't hate it, to be honest. I wouldn't hate it. Honestly, for us, West Virginia's been an outlier in the Big 12 so long geographically. And still are to a degree. I mean, we do have Cincinnati and UCF somewhat close. I mean, UCF's still 700 miles away, so it's not that close, but they're at least in the Eastern time zone.
Right.
It would be nice to have another Eastern time zone school in the league that's, in the same time zone, and that fans could travel to if they chose to, at least the fans in that northern part of the state. A little bit easier than, the other games, right? Most schools in the Big 12 are 1,000 miles away, so it would be nice in that regard. Obviously, you don't love the football program right now, but I think if you put UConn, I think if they had an opportunity to get in the Big 12 and get Big 12 revenue, And if they would spend that on football, I think they could compete in football. I mean, we saw what they did in the Big East in football. They made BCS bowl games. They won the league a time or two. I mean, they were competitive. I think they could do that again, potentially. But from a basketball standpoint, I think it'd be a no-brainer. You'd love to have them in the conference, right? So I have mixed feelings. I wouldn't hate it. I'd be okay with it. I don't necessarily – they're not my first choice, obviously, but if it can make the conference a way, it can make the conference more money and help West Virginia and Cincinnati and some of the Eastern schools out from a geographic standpoint, then I say bring them in.
Yeah,
what do you think?
No, it would obviously be a big blow for the Big East, for the league.
Right.
I'm hopeful that at some point football just kind of does its own thing and the other sports reset geographically. Maybe that's just a crazy fantasy, but it just does, the football leagues, it just doesn't make sense. And I think West Virginia and UConn should be in a league, but I think they should probably be in a league with Syracuse and with Georgetown. And I'm obviously recreating an old time thing, but
okay.
Football just doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of these schools. And I don't know.
No, I agree. I think that at some point we may get to. I mean, the money in football has gotten so big now that I definitely see a time down the road in the next 5 to 10 years, probably leaning towards 10 years, that maybe more, that football separates itself and breaks away, kind of becomes its own entity. And I think once that happens, you may see the regional conferences start to reform in Olympic sports and the non-revenue sports. So I wouldn't hate that. I mean, it would be easier on travel for the athletes. It would be easier on travel for the fans. It would be cost savings for the universities, So I don't think that would necessarily be a bad thing. You can have your region, you can have your national football conferences if you want, but to have national conferences in these sports like basketball where they have to travel multiple times a week, I just don't think it makes a bit of sense at all.
Like I said, I really wanted to go to this game. As soon as I saw it was out there, I wanted to try and make it happen. And because the idea of you can actually go to it, even for the Big East, I'm not driving to Creighton. I'm not driving to Xavier. I'm not driving to Marquette. But Morgantown, I've done it. It's possible.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Georgetown still has a football team, right? They're just FCS program. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're in the Patriot with schools like Lehigh, Bucknell. So they're at the level that they should be.
Right. Gotcha. All right. Well, Bobby, man, I'm really looking forward to this game coming up this Saturday. Anything else about Georgetown that West Virginia fans need to know, or any other players they need to be on the lookout for coming up this Friday night, rather, I should say, in this game?
I think Georgetown fans, I haven't talked about Jordan Burks a lot. We did mention his height. I wouldn't be surprised if Ed did make I guess it's what I want to do, so that's why I'm saying it. But I think making a lineup change, because he's kind of starting now that Julius is out, the big 7-footer from New Zealand. He's starting both of his options at the 5 spot, which I think can be a little bit dangerous. So I think we're going to see more of Jordan Burks with the new roster that he has to deal with. So I think that Drew Fielder and Jordan Burks would be kind of my X factors for this game. If they can get a lot of production out of those guys, then I think Georgetown's chances of an upset dramatically increase. And I think that's what I would say, that if I'm West Virginia, if Georgetown can really impose their will and their size between Fielder and Burks, I'm assuming Sorber's going to just be Sorber. But if those guys are a big factor, then I think the Hoyas are going to put themselves in the spot where at the last media timeout, they have a chance to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I was sitting there looking rebounds per game. The discrepancy is not what I thought it would be. It's 37.9 to 37.1. But, man, that size, what worries me more about anything, I know in Gonzaga, West Virginia had stretches where they struggled to stop Gonzaga's bigs from scoring the ball around the basket. That I think I'm more concerned about that than I am rebounding, to be honest. But, I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes you just can't do anything about it when a guy's 6-7 inches taller than you. So anyway, and if you have 3 guys in your lineup that are 6'9" and up, in Sorber, Fielder, and Burks, and West Virginia's tallest guy is 6'8", that could pose some issues. So West Virginia's going to have to hope for maybe get some steals on the perimeter, get some fast break points. I think that's how they win the game. They get fast break points and create so much pressure at in the backcourt that the Georgetown struggles to get the ball down low to their big guys. Kind of what they did. It's kind of what they did to Gonzaga, to be honest. They kept the ball out of the paint as much as they could, because when Gonzaga did get it in the paint, they scored most of the time. West Virginia just has to keep the ball out of the paint to win this game.
Georgetown's got to keep Sorber on the floor, no foul trouble, and that's going to be their best shot.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of lame, maybe. I think Georgetown hangs close, probably beats the Ken Palm spread. It's hard to pick them to win this game without seeing them against a major opponent other than Notre Dame. That game did not go well, but right. I think that for this Georgetown team, playing close, being in it, like I said at the last media timeout, will really do a lot for their season and their confidence going forward. They go up to Syracuse after this, and then basically you're in league play.
What is the Ken Palm spread? I haven't seen
it. Ken Palm's got West Virginia winning by 8.
Okay, that sounds about reasonable.
With about an 8, it's the same as the ESPN with about an 80% chance for Mountaineers win.
Got it.
So I think if Georgetown can play it closer than that, I think, and if they they don't give up a million threes, the defense looks good. I think that if you're a Georgetown fan, listen to this. You don't want to hear about moral victories, but I think that there are scenarios where Georgetown could go up there, lose, and still be like, hey, we're on the right path.
Yeah. Well, it's all in perspective, right? Where has your program been? Where is it going? What's the next logical step, right? That's why I came into this season. I don't expect. Now, expectations are starting to change a little bit after last weekend, but I didn't expect West Virginia to make the NCAA tournament this year. I thought, hey, if they can win 15, 16 games, win a few games they're not supposed to, look good doing it, be competitive in the Big 12, not necessarily win a bunch of games, I'd be okay with that, right? Because it's, like I said, completely new roster turnover, new coaching staff, and then they go to battle for Atlantis and knock off 2 ranked teams, I'm thinking, including one who's in the Big 12. I'm thinking, okay, maybe they do have a shot here to get to the NCAA tournament. So expectations are starting to move a little bit in Morgantown. So for good or for bad, we'll see. We'll see if it's if that was a smart thing to do or not. But
that's what happens when you beat Gonzaga and Arizona. And then I remember when Butler first joined the Big East, Georgetown was in a pre-existing tournament with them, so they played Butler in a game where it wasn't a Big East game, and then they played them again, which is what you guys are doing with Arizona. So you guys were already going to play Arizona, but the idea of beating Arizona in that tournament, and Gonzaga obviously raises the expectations. So,
well, I mean, these tournament fields, they normally only have one team from a conference in these tournaments, but
to avoid such incidents.
Correct. But these MTE schedules are made. I mean, the tournament events we're talking about, they're made, months or years out before, and that, I'm assuming that was made before we knew Arizona was coming to the Big 12. So it just is what it is. Right. Same thing with football. We had 2 football games, two teams in the league this year played each other, or 4 teams, 2 games occurred that were conference games, but technically not conference games. You know what I mean? So I think Utah and Baylor played, and then I think Arizona State played somebody, but they weren't or maybe in BYU and Kansas State. But anyway, they weren't conference games because they were already on the schedule, and it was too hard to change the schedule last minute. So they said, okay, we're still going to play them. They just won't count towards the conference record. So it's kind of weird, but that's conference realignment. It's
a weird time in college sports.
Absolutely. Well, Bobby, listen, man, I know you have things to do today, as do I. But I appreciate you taking time out again. If you guys want to find Bobby, he's on X at Bobby Bancroft, at Bobby Bancroft. You can find him at the Casual Hoya Podcast or casualhoya.com. He covers Georgetown. Bobby, thanks again for coming on, man. It's been fun.
It has been fun, and I hope it's an old Big East type style game. That I hope it's close. And
absolutely,
I think both programs are going in the right direction right now.
Agreed, man. I think Ed Cooley was the right hire for Georgetown, and I also feel the same about DeVries at West Virginia. So hopefully it'll be a good fun game to watch Friday night. Hopefully the Mountaineers come out on top, But I do hope it's a good game.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
I appreciate
yes, sir.
letting me come on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.
And we're done.